The Bruins continue their 5-game road trip. Thursday night, they're in Seattle to take on the Kraken, a team that, as you stated previously, just outside the playoff picture at the moment. Then Saturday, they go to Vancouver to take on the Vancouver Canucks, and old friend Jake DeBrusk is out there. Danton Heinen is there as well. As tough as the loss was on Tuesday night, it sort of doubles the importance of the Thursday night game in Seattle.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Dale, you've been on plenty of these babies. Um, you know, you got to be careful because, as this trip rolls on, it gets a little bit tougher. And the way you end it, remember, you're going to end with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I understand they have not gotten off to the start that they wanted, but they're starting to pick it up. They won again here last night. You're facing a Calgary team that's been really good at home. I know the Vancouver Canucks have struggled on home ice, but they recently got a big infusion with Thatcher Demko and JT Miller kind of back in the fold for this team. And that's why a game against Seattle, in so many ways, it's big, baby. How do you respond? How do you play across that 60 minutes? Yes, you want the right result, but I think for the Bruins, going back to one of the conversations that we were having earlier, in the first 9 games, they deserved those wins. They absolutely earned those wins. In the first 20 games, and they won only 8 of them, I don't know, there was a few where it's like, hey, they were able to sneak it out in overtime, or they were able to grab some extra points. And some of the losses that they had, it was hard walking out of the building thinking to yourself, oh, you know what, I think they deserve better. So let's see how the Bruins dig in against Seattle. Deal with the time change, deal with the loss, and are they able to get back to the things that made them successful in those first 9 games, being stingy, playing hard to play against. And because here's the other thing, Dale, I think that started to crop up, like the offense is starting to pick up. I think lost in the game against the Jets, David Pastrnak scored on the power play. That's the first time it's happened since October 26th. And the Bruins, in their limited looks on the man advantage, it looked a lot better. That's encouraging for this team, especially on the road, because you know how a power play in many ways on the road can help you generate momentum, which is much more difficult to do when you're away from your home building. So that's a good sign for the team. But in the big picture, how do you play as 5-man units? How do you play 5-on-5? And if they check in the way that they did in the first 9 games, they're going to have pucks more, and it's going to give them some more opportunities to score.
We talked about the goaltending decision for Joe Sacco. Part of the information that he's dealing with on this is that the Bruins and Kraken played back on November 3rd. Bruins won the game 2-0, and Jeremy Swayman had his only shutout of the season against them.
He did. I think that those are all the factors that you're going to kind of wheel in, and this is what makes goalie Bob so good at what he does. He'll take a look at the big picture and think about what a goaltender did against an opponent. When's the last time Korpisalo played? How does he look against their version of offense and their version of shooters? Where are we during the course of the season? I think, Dale, because you're a guy that's also done baseball as well as hockey. The way I look at goaltending coaches, I look at them like pitching coaches, because most managers have no idea about pitching, and a lot of the decision making, and that's changed a little bit with some of the rules, but nevertheless, I think how to correct guys, or when to throw guys in certain innings, or when to take them out of certain innings, what matchups are better. A lot of managers in baseball, they're going to leave that to the pitching coach. And if you talk to head coaches around the National Hockey League, and other than Patrick Waugh, I can't think off the top of my head of another head coach who's a former goaltender around the National Hockey League. There aren't a lot of them. Most head coaches, they're like, I leave this to the goaltending coach, because all I know is I know what they look like as a shooter. I don't know anything about the technical aspects of the game. And goalies, listen, they speak a different language than the rest of the players. You can ask Razor about that one. And that's what makes goalie Bob so good at what he does, being able to communicate and at the same time bringing the best out of who his goaltending tandem is.
Let's talk about Vancouver for a minute. Old friend Jake DeBrusk has been ablaze of late. 10 goals, 12 points in his last 9 games. uh, everybody in Boston who knew Jake DeBrusk liked him. He got a great ovation from the fans when the Canucks were back in Boston. It's nice from his perspective to see things going well for him.
No, terrific. Listen, all the best to Jake DeBrusk. Terrific kid, wonderful person, great family, and he's off to a great start. He's got 13 goals in the first 27 games. He is a streaky scorer. He had some good years with the Bruins, and there are a couple of games in particular with Jake DeBrusk that really stand out. Dale, I don't know what it is for you. One of them is going to be Fenway Park, where he scores 2 goals. The Bruins come from behind against the Penguins, and we find out after the game he's got a busted leg and a busted hand. That was a quality performance. And then Jake always seemed to elevate his game in the playoffs. The game winner in Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. How many big goals did he take? And at the same time, he took a lot of punishment. I can think of a cross-check to the head from Nazem Kadri that he got during the course of that game. But terrific things for Jake DeBrusk. You know, I know Donnie Sweeney, when he had talked about the extension for Jake DeBrusk, and I think it was before we approached July 1st and before the end of the regular season, I think the words that he uses, we took an aggressive position with Jake. I think they would have loved to have had him back, but what he was able to get on the open market wasn't going to be something that the Bruins were going to be able to match. And they had other needs that they needed to address. So Jake's off to a great start. The Bruins are going to have to contend with him, one of the most dynamic players in last year's Norris Trophy winner, in Quinn Hughes, who's a really good player. You know what's funny is Elias Pettersson is a star player around the National Hockey League, but against the Bruins, he seems, you don't often notice him in those games, but he's a really good player. And I'm sure that Rick Tocchet has that group trying to figure it out on home ice so they can improve their standing in the Pacific Division in the Western Conference.
You mentioned Thatcher Demko previously, a Vezina Trophy finalist, one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League, just recently made his season's debut. Wouldn't be a bit surprised if the Bruins see him on Saturday in Vancouver.
No, not at all. You know, especially playing against a team, he played college hockey, obviously, in the area. But for Thatcher Demko, it was a weird injury that he experienced. So apparently it was a muscle in his knee. And I think that the way I read it was that it's rare for hockey players to have this type of an injury, but it controls the stability of the knee. And he actually experienced it last year. You know, if you remember, the Vancouver Canucks went on that run, and I think Thatcher Demko played 1 game. And then Casey DeSmith played 3 more, and they went with their third guy, Artur Shilovs, and they went deep into the second round. They took the Edmonton Oilers to a Game 7 where the Oilers were ultimately able to prevail. But Demko's, listen, he's one of the best goaltenders around the National Hockey League. You're going to see he and Jeremy Swayman going head-to-head in that contest. And Hockey Night in Canada, baby, staying up late. Stay up late, Dale. You know, you came back. You know, why didn't you come back for some afternoon games on the East Coast rather than
I was wondering.
staying up
I was
late
wondering
for
about
Vancouver?
that. What the heck? I'll sleep when I retire again, eventually. There's some things in hockey that you just can't explain, and the Vancouver Canucks record is one of them. They're 10-2-1 on the road, and yet at home they're a pedestrian hockey team.
Well, there are, and I think the other thing, Dale, and I'm sure you've seen it for years around the NHL, that sometimes there are a few built-in things at home that you have to deal with that sometimes teams have a hard time processing, at least early in the season, where, especially if your team isn't scoring or playing up to the way that they want. Well, the fans, and certainly the fans in Vancouver, they're going to get on that team. And then you head away from Vancouver. You don't have to deal with any distractions. And it's just the team unto itself. And because of that, I think they're able to play a little bit differently. But it's hard to tell. We'll get an opportunity, when we head out there to Vancouver to see what they look like on home ice. I guarantee they're going to be fired up to play against the Bruins. They were not very good in the first game in Boston. There was just one guy, and I think Rick Tocchet's comments, I'm sure you saw it after the game. Kevin Lankinen was the first star, second star, and third star of that game, the way the Canucks played in that one. And the Bruins were terrific. They just couldn't solve Lankinen.